Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the Riddle of the Red Umbrella. The bell rang at 3 minutes past 11, a steady, deliberate pressure rather than a careless jangle. I was in the front hall already, hat in hand, preparing to step out on an errand Wolfe had contrived merely to remind me of my subordinate station. Fritz was in his kingdom below, tending to some mysterious source he had guarded from me with Swiss solemnity. That left me the door, as always, which I swung open to find a young woman poised on the threshold. She was clutching a red umbrella so vivid it seemed an affront to the mild September sunshine that washed West 35th Street. Her gloved hands tightened over the handle as though it might keep her anchored. She looked to be 25, though fear added years to her expression. A small hat clung to her hair, and the veil trembled with her quickened breath. "Is Mr. Wolfe at home?" she asked, voice clipped yet unsteady, the words trained to carry despite her nervousness. I told her Wolfe was at home, but whether he was receiving callers was another matter. She leaned closer, eyes darting over her shoulder as if shadows trailed her every move. "Please," she whispered, "I must speak to him. I'm being followed." That was the sort of declaration one didn't fling about idly, but her hands, pale beneath the gloves, betrayed sincerity. I ushered her inside with a gesture. The hall swallowed her perfume, faint and floral, not cloying. She kept that umbrella clutched tight against her ribs, absurd under the cloudless sky. I led her toward the office, rehearsing in my mind the look Wolfe would deliver when his morning routine was disturbed. At the door I paused, giving her a chance to steady herself. She drew a breath, nodded once, and followed me inside. The office was shaded, the light filtered by the heavy curtains Wolfe preferred at this hour. He sat behind his desk in the yellow chair, immense frame composed in disapproval. His eyes lifted from the pages before him, glacial with annoyance at interruption. "Archie," he said, the single word carrying the weight of reproach. I explained the young lady's insistence. Wolfe permitted no breach of routine lightly, but even he sensed her desperation. He gestured with 2 fingers, a monarch tolerating a petition. She stepped forward, clutching the umbrella as though it were shield and weapon both. "Mr. Wolfe," she began, her voice firmer now, "I am in danger. I cannot explain everything, but I beg your help." Wolfe leaned back, lids narrowing, his gaze appraising her as one might assess a curious specimen. "Madam," he said, "you have already presumed upon my time. 5 minutes only. Use them with efficiency." Her story spilled forth in a disjointed stream. She had lost a notebook, she claimed, small but filled with matters of importance. A man had demanded its return, a man she would not name. She believed he was near, following her steps through the city. She insisted the notebook held no great secrets, yet her agitation belied that. I watched Wolfe's face remain impassive, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, each detail weighed with clinical detachment. I asked a question or two, but she dodged with evasions, never giving a name, never offering an address. The more she spoke, the less substance emerged. Wolfe's lips compressed until they formed a thin barrier. "Enough," he declared at last, cutting her words short. "Your tale is a fabric of omissions. I do not deal in phantoms. Return when you possess facts." His dismissal was final. She faltered, eyes wide with the knowledge she had failed. With a stiff nod she turned away, clutching the umbrella, and I escorted her back through the hall. At the threshold she paused. Her eyes flickered toward me, uncertain, as though weighing whether to speak again. Instead, she offered a thin, hurried thanks, then stepped into the sunlit street. I closed the door behind her, turning back toward the quiet office. Yet when I retraced her steps to collect my hat, something caught my eye. There, propped against the red client chair, stood the umbrella, bright scarlet fabric folded neatly, the curved handle gleaming in the dim light. She had not forgotten it in error. She had left it, deliberate as a signature, an unspoken message pressed into the silence of Wolfe's domain. I stood a moment regarding it, hearing only the tick of the wall clock and the faint stir of traffic beyond the curtains. Then I carried the umbrella to Wolfe's desk. He had returned to his papers, but his eyes lifted when I set it down. He studied the object, and a faint line creased his brow. "Pfui," he muttered, which was Wolfian for more than it seemed. The red umbrella lay between us, mute, mysterious, and waiting for its tail to unfold. Without rising, I slid the umbrella closer across the blotter. Wolfe turned the silver band with a thumb, revealing faintly etched initials, and let the lamplight skate over the canopy before shutting it again. I leaned closer. You think she left it behind on purpose? Wolfe's mouth curved downward, not into a frown, but into something nearer disdain. Phooey, of course. She wished to plant it here, that I might not ignore her plight. He folded his hands together. A woman who claims danger yet withholds substance resorts to subterfuge. Her desperation took this form. Leaving umbrellas is a novel way of hiring a detective, I said, dropping into the nearest chair. Though it might look peculiar if the newspapers report Wolfe and Goodwin handling stray rain gear while the sun shines on Manhattan. That won me a glare, which was all the applause I expected. He regarded me a moment, then reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared within minutes, wiping flour from his hands with the efficient dignity of a man who tolerated interruptions only when Wolfe demanded them. Wolfe instructed him to bring beer. Fritz bowed slightly and departed without comment. Wolfe never drank at this hour, which told me his thoughts were troubled. When the chilled glass arrived, Wolfe took a measured sip, then set it aside. "Archie," he said, his tone weighted with authority, "trace this umbrella. Begin discreetly. No flamboyance." "Trace it how? Shall I ask every umbrella stand in Manhattan if they recognize their cousin?" He gave me the look one reserves for a child refusing arithmetic. "Begin with craftsmen. Only a handful in this city could execute such work. The initials will provide guidance. Proceed with dispatch." I rose, adjusted my tie, and picked up the umbrella again. "All right. I'll chase the trail of raindrops through sunny streets. If anyone asks, I'll say Wolfe insists I expand our line into meteorology." That provoked a harumph, which in Wolfe's dialect was the signal for dismissal. I phoned Saul Panzer to start at Talbot's gallery and watch for her. If she appeared or called, he'd take the tale from there, discreet, no flamboyance. Back in the office, Wolfe cracked an eyelid while I reported Saul's engagement and set the umbrella on the desk. Wolfe inclined his head a fraction, the equivalent of high praise. I remained standing. "Do you want me to start now with the shops?" Wolfe opened his eyes fully, their dark weight pinning me. "Yes. You will find that precision in craftsmanship narrows the field. Do not return until you possess fact, not conjecture." So I set forth into the Manhattan afternoon, umbrella under arm, walking past the brownstone steps into a city whose rhythm I knew by heart. Horns blared from the avenue, vendors called their wares, and the sidewalks pressed with humanity. The umbrella, garish in daylight, drew glances as I moved. It was not my habit to advertise myself, but Wolfe had commanded, and I obeyed. The first shop I tried was on Madison Avenue, a narrow establishment that smelled of leather and polish. The proprietor, an elderly man with spectacles, examined the umbrella with reverence. He admired the stitching, praised the grain of the wood, and shook his head. "Not ours," he said finally, regret in his voice, "but I know the hand. Try Harrow and Denton on 47th. I thanked him and continued. At Harrow and Denton, the manager, sleek and urbane, took one glance and raised his brows. "Distinctive," he said. "Yes, we fashioned several such commissions. May I?" He examined the handle minutely, then tapped the initials. "This is Denton's engraving. I recall the order. Placed under the name Charles H. Morton, though I suspected a pseudonym, paid in cash." I asked for details, but he claimed confidentiality. I pressed with a smile and a well-placed remark about Wolfe's influence. That softened him. He admitted the client had insisted upon discretion, had even requested a small alteration to the handle's weight, as if to conceal something within. I thanked him, made a mental note, and left before curiosity betrayed me. By late afternoon I returned to the brownstone, the umbrella once again in my hand, feeling heavier now with what it suggested. Wolfe awaited in the office, the air scented faintly of Fritz's preparations for dinner. I delivered the report, noting the possible false name, the payment in cash, and the hint of hidden construction. Wolfe listened in silence, fingertips pressed together. When I finished, he nodded once. As expected, the object is no mere ornament. It is an implement of concealment, chosen with deliberation. Its abandonment here was calculated. We must determine by whom and to what end. I dropped into my chair, stretched my legs and reached for the glass of milk Fritz had placed on the side table. At least the day's weather cooperates, I said. I'd look a fool carrying this in the rain. Wolfe allowed himself the faintest snort, then closed his eyes, already arranging the next movement in a game whose pieces were only beginning to take shape. Inspector Kramer arrived the following morning, with the subtlety of a freight train derailed on our doorstep. The bell clanged with such violence I expected the brass to protest. I crossed the hall at a brisk clip, opened the door, and found him already jabbing his cigar between his teeth, though unlit, jaw clamped with a fury that meant he had news and no patience for courtesies. He shoved past me, growling my name in greeting, and stomped toward the office with the inevitability of weather one does not alter. Wolfe didn't look up from the morning papers. He had finished breakfast and the orchids. The yellow chair had him as usual. Kramer barged in, scattering the calm with his boots, and halted before the desk. "Wolfe," he barked, "we've got trouble." Wolfe looked up slowly, eyes registering displeasure at the intrusion, then returned to his page. "You invariably do," he murmured. Kramer's face purpled. He yanked the cigar free and jabbed it toward Wolfe. "A man was stabbed to death near Washington Square last night. We pulled him out of an alley at dawn. And do you know what we found at the scene?" I took a step nearer, more curious than cautious, though Wolfe still hadn't shifted. Kramer slammed the words into the air. "A scrap of red silk, torn, bright as blood, matches an umbrella canopy." He paused, glaring, waiting for Wolfe to flinch. Wolfe did not oblige. He adjusted his spectacles and continued reading until Kramer snapped the paper from his hands and slapped it on the desk. Wolfe sighed, heavier than lead. "If you expect gratitude for disturbing my morning, you are unlikely to receive it. You possess a corpse, a location, and a fragment of fabric. Hardly a puzzle yet." Kramer leaned across the desk. "Hardly a puzzle? Listen, that silk matches an umbrella. And last night you had a visitor. Don't deny it." Archie opened the door. "A woman carrying a red umbrella described by witnesses near the square. You're tied to this already." I cleared my throat. "I didn't mention any umbrella to your men." His eyes cut to me, sharp as a bayonet. "Then you should have. We're trying to solve a murder, Goodwin, not play house." Wolfe raised a finger. "Archie tells me what he deems pertinent. I determine what is useful. At present, you possess correlation, not consequence. An umbrella is an umbrella." Kramer slammed his palm on the desk, rattling Wolfe's beer glass, though untouched at that hour. "Cut it out. I want to see it." That was my cue to keep a steady face. The umbrella rested in the safe, precisely where Wolfe had placed it after last night's inspection. Wolfe's voice was velvet wrapped around iron. "You want to see what, Inspector?" "The umbrella," he spat. "I have none," Wolfe replied, smooth as poured honey. Kramer stared, teeth grinding, then swung to me. "Goodwin, if you've hidden it, I'll haul you down and let the boys sweat it out of you." I lifted my brows. "You'd better send more than boys, then. If I had an umbrella, I'd be using it to shade my salary from the sun. But as you see, the weather is fine." That earned me a roar, but Wolfe cut it with a hand. "Inspector, your energies are misapplied. Produce evidence that links this alleged umbrella to the murder with certainty. Until then, you are wasting my time." Kramer dragged at the unlit cigar as though strangling it would yield satisfaction. He began to pace the carpet, the rhythm sharp, his temper brewing. "A man's dead, Wolfe. Stabbed clean through the chest. Name was Victor Talbot, art dealer. No robbery, wallet intact. Whoever did it wanted something else. Witnesses say he argued with a woman near the square. She carried a red umbrella. And here I find that same description leading me to your door." I glanced at Wolfe. Talbot was no stranger. His name surfaced often in whispers about shady transactions and rivalries in the galleries. Wolfe's eyes had narrowed to slits, his mind already digesting more than he admitted aloud. "Interesting," he muttered. Kramer pounced. "So you do know something." "I know you have a corpse," Wolfe said flatly. "I know you have silk torn from an umbrella. Beyond that, conjecture, and I do not deal in conjecture." "Then hand over the umbrella and we'll test it." "I repeat," Wolfe said, each syllable dropping like stone, "I have none." The silence bristled until Fritz entered, carrying a tray with coffee. He glanced once at the scene, Kramer looming, Wolfe immovable, and placed the tray gently on the side table. Without a word, he withdrew, his composure untouched by homicide or inspector. Kramer seized his hat. "You're obstructing justice, Wolfe. One day I'll have you where no clever words can pry you loose." Wolfe inclined his head the barest fraction. "Perhaps. Until then, good morning." Kramer stormed out, the door shuddering in his wake. I followed him to the hall, ensuring his departure, then returned to find Wolfe already pouring coffee. His manner was calm, but I caught the twitch of his fingers on the porcelain. "So," I said, lowering myself into a chair, "our mysterious visitor brings us a corpse before lunch. You going to tell Kramer about the umbrella?" "No," Wolfe said, "not until the facts align. A red umbrella alone is inadequate. We require the motive that attached it to murder." I leaned back, staring at the closed safe. "Then I'd say the game is already moving faster than you'd like." Wolfe drank his coffee, expression unreadable, while the faint hum of traffic outside reminded me that Manhattan had no patience for men who hesitated. The umbrella waited in silence, its secret stitched tight, while the shadow of Victor Talbot's death lengthened across the morning. The bell rang at 10:30, hesitant yet persistent, like a hand unwilling but compelled. I left my desk in the office and went to the front hall. Fritz was in the kitchen. I heard the faint clatter of utensils from below, confirming he would not appear. Opening the door, I found her again, the same young woman who had pressed herself upon us yesterday. The veil was gone, her eyes wide and red, and her gloves wrinkled from being clutched too tightly. She had no umbrella this time. Her lips trembled as she asked if Mr. Wolfe would receive her. I led her in. She moved quickly, almost stumbling, then caught herself, as though the house itself lent her temporary safety. Wolfe looked over the rim of his book and let it drop to the blotter, dour but listening, already aware that her return meant no idle courtesy. She sank into the red chair opposite, clasping her hands together in her lap, and for a long moment no one spoke. The office was silent, but for the steady tick of the wall clock. At last she drew a breath and blurted the words, "He is dead. Mr. Talbot, my employer. They say he was stabbed near Washington Square." Her voice cracked, then steadied as she forced the confession. "The umbrella you have, it was his. I should never have brought it here, but I was afraid." Wolfe's eyes hardened. He leaned back, fingers joining beneath his chin, the gesture that signalled inquiry. "You will be precise. Who are you, and what relation had you to Mr. Talbot?" She hesitated, then gave her name, Margaret Fenton. She said she had been secretary to Victor Talbot for 2 years, entrusted with correspondence, schedules, and sometimes more than clerical matters. I arranged exhibitions, catalogued pieces, managed purchases. He relied on me. The words spilled quickly, anxious to establish her role as loyal functionary. "You were with him last evening?" Wolfe asked. Her head dropped. "Yes, I was the last to see him. He left the gallery late. We had argued." I kept my face still, though the phrase landed heavy. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Argued about what?" She twisted the gloves in her hands. "A notebook. I cannot say more." "You must," Wolfe insisted, his tone brooking no retreat. "You come here seeking assistance. You will provide candour or nothing." She raised her eyes. "He kept notes of transactions. Clients, prices, sometimes matters not for public knowledge. That book vanished yesterday. He accused me of misplacing it. I swore I had not." I leaned a little forward. "Did you?" Her eyes darted to me, indignant. "No, but he did not believe me. He threatened dismissal worse. I left him there in the office, furious." Her voice dropped. "Now he is dead, and I was the last with him. They will say I killed him." Wolfe remained still, heavy lids concealing thought. At length he said, "What of the umbrella?" "It was his. He prized it. A gift from a patron, he told me, though I always thought he purchased it himself. Last night he carried it. I took it when I left. Not as theft. I wanted him to follow, to speak again. But he did not. Instead, I came here, hoping you would help." She lowered her head into her hands, shoulders shaking. The sob was real enough, yet beneath it I heard the faint discord that troubled me. She had claimed to take the umbrella to provoke a reconciliation, yet yesterday she had presented it to us as if fearing pursuit. The strands did not join neatly. Wolfe let her cry a moment, then spoke, calm and firm. "Miss Fenton, If you wish my help, you will reveal every relevant fact. You may withhold nothing. You fear suspicion. To dispel it, you must expose all." She nodded through tears. "Yes, I understand." I watched her closely. Her distress was plain, yet inconsistencies lingered, like shadows behind bright glass. I made mental note of each, storing them for later. This was not the time to challenge her. Wolfe had not given the signal. He preferred to press alone, letting silence pry where words could not. He asked for details of her departure, the hour she left Talbot, whether anyone saw her go. She said the gallery cleaner had glimpsed her near 8, and that she had taken a cab to her small apartment. She claimed no visitors, no calls, only restless pacing until she came to us. Each answer came too swiftly, rehearsed, though tinged with real fear. Wolfe absorbed it all. "Very well. You will not be arrested yet, though suspicion is natural. The police will call upon you soon. You will not speak further without advice." He gestured toward me. "Archie will provide instructions. For now, you will go. Return when summoned." She rose shakily. "You believe me? You think I'm innocent?" "I believe nothing," Wolfe said. "I await evidence, but I perceive you are frightened enough to be useful. That is sufficient." She gave a faint nod, turned, and allowed me to escort her to the hall. At the door she paused, whispered, "Please help me," and hurried into the sunlight. I closed the door firmly, locking it against both the city and her panic. When I returned, Wolfe was motionless, eyes closed, lips compressed. I waited until he opened them, then spoke. "She says she took the umbrella to lure him, yet yesterday she claimed she was followed. That doesn't add up." Wolfe inclined his head slowly. "Yes, Archie, it does not. We shall examine further. For now, silence. Kramer must not suspect we hold this link until necessity dictates." I nodded, settling into my chair. The umbrella, locked away, remained our solitary bridge between a fearful secretary and a murdered dealer. Inconsistencies or not, it promised more revelations. Wolfe, calm as a fortress, had already begun arranging the pieces. I began with a walk uptown, the umbrella left safe in Wolfe's possession and my assignment clear. Dig among Talbot's circle and see what surfaced. The morning had shaken off its chill. Sunlight glanced off plate glass windows, and traffic pulsed with the impatience of Manhattan business. My first call was on Gregory Mason, owner of a rival gallery on East 57th. His door bore brass letters polished to blindness, and his secretary gave me the kind of look that measured shoes before it measured face. I asked for Mason, and after a short wait I was led into an office that smelled of varnish and expensive paint. Mason was tall, thin, hair swept back with more calculation than wind. He received me with reluctance, and when I named Talbot his smile tightened. "A tragic end," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "but inevitable in a way. The man swam with sharks." I asked what he meant, and he shrugged delicately. "Unsound dealings. He undercut prices, secured works of dubious origin. The market will breathe easier now." He leaned forward. "If you're implying I bore him malice, you're wasting time. His ruin was certain without my assistance." I kept my tone light. "You didn't happen to see him last evening?" "I did not," Mason replied crisply. "I dined with clients at the plaza. Half the restaurant could attest to it." He rose, signaling the end. As I departed, I noted the faint curl of satisfaction on his lips, the look of a man who found the timing of tragedy convenient, if not crafted. From Mason's gallery, I went downtown to meet another of Talbot's secretaries, a woman named Ellen Pierce. She had summoned me herself after hearing of my inquiries, which meant ambition or anxiety. Her apartment was modest, neat, the walls lined with books on art history. She greeted me in a tailored suit that announced efficiency and offered coffee with the briskness of one accustomed to arranging details. "Mr. Talbot was brilliant," she said once we sat. "But he squandered his brilliance. He withheld credit, stole ideas, treated loyalty as something bought and sold." Her eyes were bright with the memory of grievances. "I deserved partnership. Instead, he kept me behind a desk." I asked where she was when Talbot died. She lifted her chin. "At home, alone. I have no alibi, if that is your line." She folded her hands, but I had no reason to harm him. His downfall was coming. He had made enemies enough without me. Her insistence struck a little too rehearsed, though her resentment was real. I asked about an umbrella, red, unusual. She frowned, shook her head. He carried one sometimes, yes, but I never examined it. That ended her usefulness. She escorted me out with courtesy so stiff it could have been cut from cardboard. The final appointment of the day was with Howard Brill, a collector whose appetite for canvases was equalled only by his appetite for notoriety. His townhouse on the Upper East Side was a monument to indulgence, marble steps sweeping upward, the doorman eyeing me as though I was selling bootlaces. Inside, Brill received me in a study cluttered with statues and half-covered canvases, each worth more than my salary. He was stout, red-faced, and expansive in manner. "Talbot owed me a canvas," he boomed, waving a hand as if the paintings could testify. "A Surat study. Promised it months ago. I advanced the funds, and still he delayed. Now he is dead, and where is my painting? Gone with him." I asked whether he had confronted Talbot. He slapped the arm of his chair. "Of course, last week. I told him I would have satisfaction. He laughed in my face." Brill's breath came fast. His anger was genuine. Now the police will ask if I killed him. Absurd. I was hosting a supper party, 30 guests. They will confirm. I mentioned the umbrella. He barked a laugh. "An umbrella? What nonsense. I deal in canvases, not haberdashery." He dismissed me with a flourish, already reaching for a decanter. By evening I returned to the brownstone, my notes collected, my shoes reminding me they had earned their keep. Wolfe was at his desk, the room warm with the aroma of Fritz's dinner preparations. I delivered my reports with the efficiency expected, detailing Mason's rivalry, Pierce's ambition, and Brill's grievance. Wolfe listened, lids heavy, expression unmoved. When I finished, he gestured toward the safe. And the umbrella remained silent. No mention of it? "None," I said. "Either they truly know nothing, or they guard it like crown jewels." The phone rang. I answered. Saul Panzer's voice came low, steady. He had trailed Margaret Fenton, learned she had visited a pawnshop off 8th Avenue, and spoken to a man known for quiet trades. Saul added more, whispers that Talbot trafficked in paintings smuggled from Europe during the war, works that had vanished in transit and reappeared under his hand. Stolen canvases, Saul said, and big money moving. I relayed it to Wolfe, who nodded once. "So, the umbrella." He lifted his glass of beer, held it a moment. "Not ornament, but vessel. Concealment for instruments of crime. Smuggling requires secrecy. A hollow handle, perhaps. A slip of silk. We progress." I leaned back, weary from the day, but unable to ignore the pattern forming. Rivals, secretaries, collectors, all with reasons to wish Talbot gone. And in the centre, the umbrella, bright and silent, a thread that tied greed, envy, and revenge together. Wolfe closed his eyes, lips pressing tight, already arranging the pieces into order. Dinner in the brownstone always arrived with the precision of a metronome, and that evening was no exception. At 8 o'clock sharp, Fritz entered bearing a silver platter from which rose the rich aroma of roast duck. He set it upon the sideboard with his customary quiet dignity, then returned with dishes already warmed. The table gleamed beneath lamplight, linen immaculate, silver polished to a reflection. Wolfe settled himself at the head, vast frame anchoring the room, while I took my place with notebook at the ready. He intended not only to dine, but to review the players, and I had learned long ago that keeping record during his discourses saved time when memory was summoned later. Fritz carved with practised hands, portioning the duck with exact strokes. The meat was tender, skin crisp, and the scent carried hints of orange and clove. Wolfe regarded it with solemn appreciation, then addressed me before lifting his fork. "Archie, you will note," he began, "that each figure surrounding Mr. Talbot stands to profit by his removal." I wrote while he ate, his voice steady, resonant. "First, Mason, the rival who sneered at Talbot's dealings. He possesses motive in rivalry, alibi in the plaza, yet satisfaction in circumstance. That mixture warrants scrutiny." He paused to sip the burgundy Fritz had poured, eyes closing briefly in contentment. "Second, Miss Fenton, secretary confidant last to see him alive. She protests innocence, yet her account frays at the edges. She speaks of a missing notebook. That object is crucial." He speared a slice of duck, chewed slowly, swallowed, then continued. "Third, Brill. The collector who advanced funds and received mockery. He bellows of grievance but hides calculation. A supper party with 30 guests may furnish proof, but also cover. I noted each with the shorthand Wolfe tolerated. He turned slightly, voice lowering. And beyond them, Miss Pearce, another secretary, though her role overlaps with Miss Fenton's. 2 secretaries in one establishment is untidy. Talbot may have divided duties to obscure dealings. That duplication invites deception. The dining room grew warm with food and argument. Fritz circulated silently, replenishing plates, his face impassive. Wolfe leaned back after the second course, fingers pressing together. Archie, the umbrella is no trifle. It was left here not from forgetfulness, but by design. It is both signal and trap, a lure to draw us, a snare to bind us should we misstep. I looked up from the page. You mean someone wanted you involved? Precisely, Wolfe said. They sought either my validation or my entanglement. The umbrella, with its initials, its hidden construction, was thrust upon me. That compels caution. We ate in silence a while, save for the clink of utensils and the muffled hum of traffic beyond the curtains. Wolfe's face remained unreadable, but I marked the lines of tension at his brow. At length dessert appeared, a compote of cherries, and Fritz withdrew, leaving us alone. Wolfe ate little, pushing the dish aside, then rose from the table, an event so rare it drew my attention fully. He moved into the office, and I followed with notebook still open. There he began to pace, a phenomenon almost as strange as the umbrella itself. His steps circled the globe near the wall, the polished surface reflecting lamplight. He touched it once, lightly, then resumed pacing. For Wolfe to abandon his chair willingly was to confess vexation. I leaned against the desk, watching him. "You're rattled," I said. "Not rattled," he corrected, "irritated. There is a distinction. The pieces are ill-arranged. Talbot's death is not mere violence, it is orchestration. The umbrella was positioned. The silk fragment left behind may have been deliberate, not accident. To draw suspicion toward Miss Fenton, or to direct attention toward me, since it resides here." I scribbled the thought. So the umbrella is the message, not just the murder clue. Indeed. He halted before the globe, eyes narrowed. It is emblem and instrument both. A vessel for contraband, perhaps. Saul's report suggests smuggling. Paintings from Europe, stolen, passed through Talbot's hands. Concealment requires ingenuity. An umbrella handle hollowed for documents or drafts is plausible. I whistled softly. That would explain the craftsmanship, the initials, the expense. Wolfe resumed pacing. Yes, but the difficulty remains. Who desired Talbot dead at that precise moment? And why deposit the umbrella here? If our visitor is guilty, her act was reckless. If she is innocent, she is being manipulated. I closed the notebook. Either way, we're in the game. Kramer's already pounding on the door. He'll come back. Of course. Wolfe returned finally to the yellow chair, lowering himself with visible relief. Therefore, we must acquire the police files. Kramer will not yield them willingly. You, Archie, will secure them. I grinned. By persuasion or persistence? He fixed me with a stare. Yes. I leaned back, stretching. That could mean dinner at Kramer's club, a poker game, or bribing a clerk. You will choose, Wolfe said, but you will succeed. Without those files, our inquiries stall. I set the notebook aside. All right. Tomorrow I'll see what charm or stubbornness accomplishes. But if Kramer bites, don't blame me for the teeth marks. Wolfe grunted. The conversation ended. He reached for the evening beer Fritz had set on the side table, lifted the glass, and drank with measured satisfaction. The office grew quiet, save for the faint creak of the chair and the steady tick of the clock. I watched him, the great bulk at rest once more, yet the tension still coiled beneath. He had paced, which meant the case had unsettled him, and that was more revealing than any deduction. The umbrella waited in the safe, silent, crimson, the one object binding all threads. Outside, Manhattan throbbed with its usual din, but inside the brownstone the air was charged with suspicion, sharpened by roast duck and sharpened further by Wolfe's demand. Tomorrow the hunt would turn toward Kramer's files, and I would be the hound sent to fetch. The Union Club sat on Fifth Avenue like a fortress, polished brass gleaming, doormen crisp as soldiers. I presented myself at the desk with Howard Brill's name and a look suggesting I belonged, though my wallet knew otherwise. The steward eyed me with suspicion, then agreed to check the books. He returned with a ledger bound in leather, its pages filled with neat columns of signatures. Brill's name appeared at 7:30, then again near midnight, but the intervals between were blank. I pointed at the page. So he was here all night? The steward hesitated. Yes. He arrived for supper and remained until after midnight. He closed the book firmly. Our members' privacy is sacrosanct, sir. His tone suggested my line of questioning had reached its limit. I thanked him, tipped lightly, and moved toward the dining hall. The room glowed with chandeliers, white linen spread like snowfields. Waiters glided silently between tables, voices low, conversation clipped. I located a waiter lingering near the sideboard, a man with dark hair and quick eyes. I asked if he had served Mr. Brill last night. The man studied me, then nodded discreetly. I pressed with casual ease. He was here all evening, yes? The waiter's mouth twitched. Mostly. He entertained 3 gentlemen, drank heavily, laughed, but he glanced around. At 10 he stepped out. Not long, perhaps 20 minutes. He returned flustered, ordered another bottle. His guests joked, but he brushed them aside. That detail lodged sharp. The murder near Washington Square had been placed around that hour. Brill's absence was brief but damning. I thanked the man, slipped him enough to encourage memory should I return, and left before questions tightened. Outside, twilight draped the avenue, traffic growling, the city's rhythm unbroken by one man's death. I carried the new piece back to the brownstone, the umbrella's shadow lengthening in my thoughts. Inside, Wolfe was in the office, orchid reports stacked, beer poured. I delivered the findings. He listened without moving, lids heavy, lips pressed. When I described the missing 20 minutes, he opened his eyes fully. As I anticipated, an alibi incomplete is worse than none. Brill thought to shield himself with the prestige of the club, but prestige is brittle when fact intrudes. I added that the ledger itself looked suspicious. The steward had closed it too quickly, as though eager to conceal more than protect. Wolfe nodded. The record was altered, names arranged to provide continuity. That confirms conspiracy, not innocence. Before I could reply, the bell clanged. I opened to find Inspector Kramer, cigar clenched though unlit, jaw set. He pushed past me, stormed into the office, and faced Wolfe. Brill says you're hounding him. He claims you sent Goodwin to smear his name. Wolfe regarded him coolly. Mr. Goodwin investigates at my direction. If Brill feels hounded, perhaps his conscience gnaws. Kramer glared at me. What did you dig up? Only that his alibi springs leaks, I said evenly. He stepped out at the right time. Kramer growled. A waiter's whisper against 30 witnesses, that won't hold. Wolfe lifted a hand. Yet it suffices to unsettle. Attend, Inspector. The umbrella links to smuggling, Talbot to stolen paintings. Brill had motive and moment. That is no trifle. Kramer chewed the cigar furiously, muttered about Wolfe's arrogance, and stomped out, slamming the door. The office regained silence. Wolfe sipped his beer. Archie, you have served well. Brill's veneer cracks. Continue to press until it shatters. I noted the approval, rare as it was, and sat back. The umbrella waited, mute, while suspicion tightened its net around a wealthy collector whose alibi could not endure a single absent quarter hour. When I entered the office, Wolfe was at his desk, eyes closed, lips pressed, the air scented faintly with Fritz's preparations below. I placed the umbrella before him and gave the report. He opened his eyes, listened without interruption, then reached for the handle. So, a compartment. His voice was measured, heavy. Archie, bring the tools. From the drawer I fetched a thin knife, a small screwdriver, and placed them beside him. He lifted the umbrella with care, turned the handle beneath the lamplight, and traced the band of silver. His eyes narrowed, then he nodded. Here, a seam, concealed. He handed it to me. Open it. I set to work, sliding the blade into the crease. The metal resisted, then gave with a faint click. The end cap lifted, revealing a hollow core. Inside lay a tightly rolled slip of paper, bound with thin thread. I eased it out and unwrapped it carefully on the desk. Wolfe leaned closer, his bulk shifting with deliberate gravity. The slip held foreign bank drafts, neat rows of figures in francs and marks, bearing the names of institutions in Zurich and Paris. The ink was precise, the sums considerable. My whistle escaped before I could check it. Wolfe's eyes glinted, dark and sharp. As I anticipated, instruments of payment, concealed within an object of seeming frivolity. Smuggling Archie. Talbot trafficked in stolen paintings. Such drafts facilitated movement, purchase, and evasion. I turned the paper in my hands. So the umbrella wasn't accessory, it was the motive. Someone wanted this more than they wanted Talbot alive. Indeed, Wolfe said. He leaned back, fingers pressing together. The murderer struck not from passion, but necessity. The drafts would have ruined, exposed, or enriched, depending upon possession. The umbrella was both container and symbol, and its presence here confirms we are thrust into the vortex. I placed the drafts on the blotter, careful not to crease them further. Wolfe studied them with detachment, yet I knew his mind churned. "We will secure these," he said. "Kramer must not know yet. Premature disclosure would scatter the pieces before we arrange them." I nodded, slipping the drafts into an envelope. "You're planning to hold them until the pattern's clear?" "Yes." He closed his eyes briefly, then reopened them. "We must determine who knew of the compartment. Denton and his craftsman, of course, the commissioner, false-named Morton, Talbot himself, and now, by extension, his associates. Each of them stands upon the precipice." The clock ticked steadily, the room heavy with consequence. Wolfe reached for his glass of beer, drank, and set it down. "Archie, note this. The umbrella itself is the central object. It is not mere clue, but cause. Our inquiries must proceed upon that axis." I wrote it down, my hand quick, the letters firm. So Brill's grievance, Mason's rivalry, Fenton's fear, all secondary. The umbrella's contents drew the knife. Wolfe gave the faintest nod. "Yes, the drafts represent fortunes. Fortunes breed murder. The rest are distractions." I leaned back, studying him. He had ceased pacing days earlier, but his bulk seemed coiled with restrained force. His words carried weight beyond their sound. "What next?" I asked. "You will visit Denton again. Press further. Discover who presented as Morton. Seek description, detail, any scrap." "All right," I said. "And Kramer?" "He will return snarling. You will tell him nothing of the drafts. Say only that inquiries continue." I slipped the envelope into the safe, turned the dial, and spun it shut. The umbrella remained on the desk, open seam exposed, handle hollow, its secret yielded. Wolfe closed his eyes, immense chest rising, lips moving almost silently. The murder motive lies not in envy nor rage, but in this object. It was never mere ornament. It was weapon, lure, and prize. The office sank into silence save for the tick of the clock and the faint stir of the city beyond the curtained windows. Fritz's voice carried distantly from below, calling to himself in Swiss dialect, pots clattering faintly. Wolfe drank again, eyes half closing. I watched him, knowing the drafts had shifted the ground beneath us. The umbrella, vivid and silent, had revealed its truth, and with it the direction of the hunt. The bell rang with such insistence that I thought for a moment it might tear itself loose. I went to the door and opened it upon Ellen Pierce, Talbot's other secretary, the one with ambitions too sharp for her modest apartment. Her eyes were wild, hair dishevelled beneath a tilted hat, and she gripped her handbag as though it were ballast keeping her upright. "I must see Mr. Wolfe," she gasped. I judged her fit for collapse, so I led her quickly to the office. Wolfe looked up from the desk with visible displeasure at the interruption, yet he did not forbid her entry. She stumbled into the red chair, clutching her handbag in both hands, breath shallow. "I killed him," she said suddenly, voice high, brittle. "I killed Mr. Talbot. It was self-defense." I froze, then looked to Wolfe. His face remained impassive, though his lids dropped half over his eyes, the sign of patience strained. "Proceed," he said quietly. She leaned forward, words spilling. "He threatened me. I'd gone to the gallery to demand recognition. He laughed, called me worthless. He reached for me. I took the knife from the desk and struck him. He fell. I fled." She covered her face, shoulders shaking. I watched her closely. Wolfe's gaze never shifted. "Describe the knife," he said. Her hands parted. A long blade, silver handle. There was blood, so much blood. Wolfe's mouth curved downward, not in pity but contempt. "Madam, the murder weapon has not been disclosed. The police have withheld it from the press. Your description is invention, not recollection. You repeat hearsay, not memory." She stared, lips trembling. "No, I saw—" "Phooey," Wolfe cut her off. "You seek attention or exoneration of another. Your tale is a fabrication. You killed no one." She blinked rapidly, hands tightening on the handbag. "But I—" "Enough," Wolfe said, his voice heavy. "You waste my time, Archie." I rose, guiding her from the chair. She resisted a moment, then let me steer her to the hall. Her breath came fast, her eyes darting, desperate for belief. At the door, she clutched my arm. "He deserved it. He ruined me. You must understand." "I understand you're in no condition for storytelling," I said gently, then opened the door. She staggered into the daylight and hurried away, heels clattering against the pavement until distance swallowed the sound. I returned to the office. Wolfe had resumed his seat, fingers steepled, eyes closed as if the interlude had been no more than a draught from an open window. I sat, waiting. At length he spoke. "She knows details only from others, not from deed. Her false confession is calculated to muddle, to divert. It confirms the desperation among Talbot's circle, not guilt." I nodded. "So she's out." "Entirely," Wolfe said. He reached for his glass of beer, lifted it, and drank with solemnity. The umbrella remained in the safe, the draft secure, the case still tangled. But one strand had been cut, and Wolfe, calm once more, prepared for the next. The bell rattled the brass in its socket, a furious summons that needed no introduction. I crossed the hall and opened the door on Inspector Kramer, his cigar already chewed to shreds though unlit, his hat shoved low. His jaw was tight, his shoulders hunched as if he carried not only the city's murders, but personal outrage enough to supply a dozen precincts. Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed past me, heavy steps shaking the carpet, and stalked into the office like a man storming a barricade. Wolfe was in the yellow chair, vast and immovable, eyes on a book but aware before the first footfall crossed the threshold. He closed it with deliberate slowness and set it aside, turning to face his adversary with calm distaste. "Inspector," he said, voice even, "you ring as if summoning a servant." Kramer flung his hat on the nearest table. "Don't you get pompous with me, Wolfe. You're sitting on evidence in a murder case. You think I don't know it? I've had enough of your games." I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. It promised to be a lively evening, though not of the social variety. Wolfe gestured toward the red chair, but Kramer remained on his feet, glaring. "You're obstructing justice," he barked. "I want that umbrella, now." Wolfe lifted his brows a fraction. "Umbrella?" "Don't play dumb. Red canopy, silver handle, torn silk from the murder scene. Witnesses saw it with Talbot. You have it. Produce it." Wolfe's lids lowered. "If I possessed such an article, it would serve clarity. At present, it does not. Therefore, you cannot have it." Kramer slammed his fist on the desk, rattling Wolfe's glass of beer. "That's not your choice. Evidence belongs to the police. You think you're above the law. I'll take Goodwin downtown and wring it out of him." I shifted but said nothing. Wolfe's eyes opened fully, dark as midnight. "If you believe Mr. Goodwin conceals evidence, charge him. Otherwise desist from threats." Kramer rounded on me. "You think you're smart, Archie, covering for him? If I drag you in, you won't wisecrack your way out." I smiled thinly. "Inspector, dragging me in would make Wolfe very cross. You've seen him cross." "Bah," Kramer spat, chewing the cigar nearly in half. "You think I respect him? I respect results, not arrogance." Wolfe folded his hands on his stomach. "You respect precision, Inspector, though you resent it. You rage because I decline to scatter fragments. When I deliver whole. Until then, silence is discipline." Kramer snorted. "Whole? You hoard facts like a miser with coins. Meanwhile, I've got a corpse, a press breathing down my neck, and a commissioner asking why Nero Wolfe sits fat and smug while we chase shadows." Wolfe's mouth twitched. Not a smile, but something near contempt. "If your commissioner demands answers, provide them. I owe him nothing." The silence tightened, the only sound the clock's tick and Kramer's ragged breath. At last he flung himself into the red chair, scowling. "All right. Talk. Why guard that umbrella? What's so special?" Wolfe considered, eyes narrowing. "Because, Inspector, an object is more than fabric and handle. It may be planted to mislead or employed to conceal. Until I discern which, presenting it to you would serve confusion. You wish clarity, not chaos." Kramer grunted. "You're dressing obstruction as virtue. A man's dead, Wolfe. Talbot was stabbed like a steer, and the only lead is that umbrella. Every hour you stall, the trail cools." "Phooey," Wolfe murmured. "The trail is not heat but logic. It cools only for those who blunder." Kramer surged upright. "I ought to shut this place down, search it from attic to cellar." "You will not," Wolfe said firmly. "You know better. The law grants you no such license without cause, and if you attempted, the uproar would sink you. You despise me, Inspector, yet you concede I am thorough. That grudging respect restrains you." Kramer's face darkened, but he did not deny it. He jabbed the cigar at Wolfe. "One of these days your arrogance will snap. I'll be waiting." I stepped forward. "Inspector, maybe you'll get more if you tell us what you've got. We know Talbot had enemies. Mason, Brill, Fenton. Any of them crack?" He glared at me, then exhaled. "They're all slippery. Mason's alibi's airtight on paper. Brill hides behind his club. Fenton weeps innocence. And every damn one of them says they never saw the umbrella. Yet a witness swears Talbot carried it last night. So where is it now?" "In safekeeping," Wolfe said calmly. Kramer spun on him. "You admit it." "I admit nothing," Wolfe replied. "I merely state it is not in circulation." Kramer's fists clenched. "You're impossible." "Exact," Wolfe corrected. For a long moment they glared at one another, the office air dense as fog. Fritz entered quietly, bearing a tray with coffee, his face serene, immune to tempests. He set it on the side table and withdrew without a word. The small civility mocked the tension. Kramer grabbed his hat. "Listen, Wolfe. If you keep stonewalling, I'll haul Archie in, charge or no charge. I'll keep him locked until you crack." I raised my brows, but kept my tone light. "That would be entertaining, Inspector, though you'd find the paperwork unkind." "Bah!" he barked again, heading for the door. Wolfe's voice followed, steady. "When the time comes, Inspector, the case will be delivered whole. Until then, refrain from bluster. It diminishes you." Kramer stopped, shoulders rigid, then shoved the door open and left with a slam that shook the hinges. I returned to Wolfe, who had resumed his chair and lifted the coffee with delicate precision. He sipped, set it down, and closed his eyes. I waited, then said, "That could have gone worse." "It will," Wolfe said, voice heavy with certainty. "Kramer fumes because he senses we advance where he treads water. He will strike again. You, Archie, must be prepared." I leaned back, considering the envelope in the safe, the umbrella beside it, silent and crimson, while outside the city roared. Wolfe sat unmoved, massive, precise, and utterly unwilling to yield. Kramer's fury had filled the office, but Wolfe's promise lingered heavier still. When the time came, the case would be delivered whole. The evening had hardly settled when Saul Panzer came knocking. I opened the door to his familiar cap, and his eyes that missed nothing, and led him through the hall into the office. Wolfe was already stationed in the yellow chair, the orchids tended, dinner still some time away, his bulk arranged with the gravity of a man expecting testimony. Saul removed his cap, nodded, and sat without ceremony. He had done his work, and his manner carried the weight of certainty. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Report." Saul's voice was level without embellishment. "The umbrella travelled. Talbot carried it first. 2 weeks ago he delivered it to Howard Brill. Several witnesses confirm they quarrelled on Brill's doorstep. Neighbours heard shouting. Talbot accused Brill of theft. Brill called him a cheat. They grappled. Brill ended with the umbrella in his possession." I set pen to notebook while Wolfe's lids lowered. Saul continued. "Later that week, Talbot returned. Another quarrel, more violent. A servant reports Talbot demanded return of his property. Brill refused, but somehow Talbot left with the umbrella again. It passed back to him." Wolfe stirred. "And on the night of his death?" Saul's voice dropped. "Contradiction. A frame shop clerk swears he saw Talbot near Washington Square, umbrella in hand. But Brill's driver claims Brill still had it. Both cannot be true." At 10, Brill left his club briefly, returned flustered, coat bulging. Talbot was killed not long after. I tapped the page. So one lies, either the clerk or the driver. Saul nodded. The clerk had no reason. The driver did. That's the pattern. Wolfe opened his eyes. Thank you, Mr. Panzer. He inclined his head, dismissal and gratitude combined. Saul rose, replaced his cap, and departed with his customary silence. I shut the door behind him and turned back. So, the umbrella's been playing shuttle between Talbot and Brill, and each quarrel louder than the last. Precisely, Wolfe said. He motioned. Archie, fetch it. I unlocked the safe, lifted the crimson object and set it on the desk. Its folded canopy glowed in the lamplight. The silver handle gleamed, the initials taunted. Wolfe regarded it as if it were a witness refusing to speak. Observe, he said. It passed from Talbot to Brill, back to Talbot, then perhaps again, each transfer accompanied by strife. Why? Not from sentiment, not from weather, but from peril concealed. I leaned against the desk. Those bank drafts. Yes. His eyes narrowed. The drafts tie to stolen canvases. Proof of transactions, proof of guilt. Whoever possessed them controlled ruin or salvation. I whistled softly. So the umbrella wasn't a gift or a bauble. It was a vault. Indeed. Wolfe's tone was heavy. Talbot wielded it as shield. Brill grasped it as weapon. Their desperation shows in quarrels conducted in public, without regard for consequence. I flipped my notebook shut. Then Talbot's murder wasn't about envy or rage. It was about getting this umbrella back. Wolfe grunted assent. He reached for his beer, lifted it, and drank. The next morning I followed Saul's trail myself. Wolfe wanted confirmation, and I was the chosen bloodhound. I started at Brill's townhouse on the Upper East Side, marble steps rising to a door too proud for its hinges. The butler met me with the kind of disdain reserved for bill collectors, but money greased even marble, and soon I was speaking with a maid who had been on duty the night Talbot stormed in. She remembered every word. Mr. Talbot shouted that Mr. Brill had tricked him, stolen from him. Mr. Brill laughed, said the umbrella was his now, that Talbot would see what ruin meant. They pushed each other. I thought blows would follow. Then the butler came and Mr. Talbot left, furious. But later he returned. They quarrelled again. This time he left with the umbrella. I saw it in his hand. I pressed her. Did Brill let it go willingly? She shook her head. No. He cursed, threatened. But Mr. Talbot had it when he left. I swear it. I left her pale and trembling in the kitchen and walked back through the marble hall, certain now the umbrella had indeed travelled. My next call was on the frame shop clerk near Washington Square. A thin fellow with paint-stained hands, he remembered the night with clarity. Mr. Talbot passed here close to 10, carried a red umbrella, silver handle. I noticed because it gleamed beneath the street lamps. He was muttering, face dark as if consumed by worry. Then he turned toward the square. Not long after I heard the commotion of discovery. That set the timeline. Talbot had the umbrella near the hour of death. But Brill's driver had told another story. I walked to Brill's club and found the man outside, polishing the car with more vigour than the paint deserved. I leaned against the fender. Last night, your employer carried the umbrella? He stiffened. Yes, he had it when he left. You're sure? His eyes flickered. Of course. I stepped closer. A clerk swears he saw Talbot with it. Which one of you is lying? He paled, wiped his brow. I only know what Mr. Brill told me to say. His voice dropped. He had it earlier, yes. But when he left the club, it was gone. He told me to claim otherwise. Please, sir, don't mention me. That was confession enough. I left him sweating on the curb and returned to the brownstone. Wolfe listened as I recounted each detail, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he closed his eyes. So, the umbrella's journey, Talbot to Brill, Brill to Talbot, and at the last, Brill sought it again. He left his club, coat bulging, agitated. Talbot died. The umbrella vanished, until it appeared here, abandoned by Miss Fenton. I said, that proves motive clear. They killed for this. Yes, Wolfe's voice was low. The umbrella itself is the fulcrum. Not envy, not jealousy, not rage, but desperation to control what it concealed. He rose, rare as sunrise, and paced before the globe. "Archie, you perceive the pattern. Human desperation charted in an object's passage, each quarrel louder, each lie sharper, men and women driven by fear of ruin. That fear begot murder." I nodded. "So the umbrella's journey is the map of the crime?" "Precisely." He sank back into the yellow chair, massive and composed. "We will deliver it whole when the time is right." The umbrella lay on the desk, crimson and silver, silent record of greed and deceit. Outside, Manhattan roared its indifferent song, but within the brownstone the truth had sharpened. Wolfe's deductions, carved from fragments, had given the object its voice. The journey was complete and its meaning clear. The morning began with Wolfe's orchids. I had just returned from posting a letter when the phone rang, and Wolfe gestured toward it without raising his head from the latest report of gallery sales in the Times. The call was from the craftsman at Denton's, the same man who had admitted to building the umbrella with a hidden compartment. His voice was cautious, but money had loosened his tongue after my last visit. He asked me to come down discreetly. That kind of invitation doesn't arrive every day, so I went. Denton's shop smelled of varnish and polish, wood and leather mingling in the air. He greeted me with a faint bow, ushered me to the back room and closed the door. "I remembered something," he said. "Not at first, but now. After the commission for Mr. Morton, your Talbot, a man came asking for the same design. He wanted a duplicate, identical canopy, identical handle, initials the same. I warned him such copying was unusual, even improper, but he insisted, paid handsomely." I leaned forward. "What man?" He shifted uneasily. "Gregory Mason, owner of the Mason Gallery. He said it was a gift. I did not believe him. But he paid in cash, and craftsmen must live." He rubbed his hands together. "So I built two, one with the compartment, as ordered, one without, as Mason required. They were identical to the eye." That was the moment the case tilted. Two umbrellas, one filled with drafts, the other a hollow fraud. Mason had known, and Mason had schemed. I returned to the brownstone where Wolfe was at his desk, beer poured, orchids finished. I set the notebook down and gave him the account word for word. He listened, eyes closed, fingers steepled. When I finished, his lids lifted. "So, two umbrellas, one genuine, one simulacrum. Mason bribed the craftsman to duplicate design. That is the fulcrum." I dropped into my chair. "It explains why witnesses contradicted each other. They weren't all lying. They saw different umbrellas." "Indeed," Wolfe said. His voice was low, grave. "The killer did not strike for jealousy or wounded vanity. He struck to recover the umbrella containing drafts. The false one was worthless." I asked, "So Mason intended to swap them?" "Precisely. He knew Talbot's umbrella concealed peril. He sought to substitute the empty twin, to leave Talbot believing himself secure while ruin lay elsewhere. But murder intervened." I leaned back. "And the drafts ended up here, which means Mason failed." "Yes." Wolfe's tone was iron. "Mason contrived but miscalculated. Someone else seized opportunity. The umbrella's journey reveals not only desperation but deceit upon deceit." Fritz entered quietly with luncheon, chicken fricassee, rice and green beans, and departed without comment. Wolfe served himself with his usual ceremony, yet his mind was not on the plate. He ate sparingly, eyes narrowed, thoughts arranging themselves like chessmen. I took the chance to ask, "What about Kramer? He'll blow his gasket when he learns there were two." Wolfe grunted. "He already fumes. When we deliver, it must be whole. Until then, silence." After lunch, I paid another visit to Mason. His gallery stood polished and cold, canvases hung with deliberate precision. He greeted me with hauteur, lips curling when I mentioned umbrellas. "You've been busy commissioning unusual accessories," I said lightly. His eyes flickered, then hardened. "You presume too much." "Denton doesn't lie," I replied. "He says you ordered a copy. Why would you do that, unless you meant to replace the real one?" His face reddened. "Absurd." I admired the design. "Nothing more." I smiled thinly. Admiration doesn't usually come with cash bribes. He turned away, fussing with a frame. "Leave my gallery, or I'll call the police." I left him to his indignation, certain he was cornered. The lie was too sharp, too quick. Back at the brownstone, I relayed it all. Wolfe nodded once, as expected. Mason is not the killer, but he is complicit. He sought to neutralize Talbot without violence by theft of the drafts. But when murder struck, his scheme collapsed. That is why he squirms now. The umbrella lay on the desk, crimson folded, silver gleaming. Wolfe tapped it with a heavy finger. This is the genuine article. The drafts prove it. The duplicate is elsewhere, perhaps still in Mason's possession. It is worthless save for deception. That distinction explains every contradiction. Witnesses saw one or the other, and truth dissolved. I asked, so the killer, whoever it was, knew the difference? Yes. Wolfe's eyes darkened. Only one who knew of the compartment would strike. That narrows the field. Talbot, Brill, Mason, and those close to them. Miss Fenton did not know. Her lies stem from fear, not knowledge. Mason schemed but lacked opportunity. Brill's desperation remained strongest. The clock ticked, heavy in the silence. Wolfe lifted his glass, drank and set it down. Archie, note this. The crime was not passion but reclamation. The killer struck because the umbrella held proof of illicit trades. The drafts would destroy reputations, fortune, perhaps liberty. To recover them was imperative. That is the heart. I wrote it down, each word deliberate. So Mason's trick with the duplicate only proves how valuable the umbrella was, and how desperate they all were to get it. Precisely. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed once more. We are close. The office was quiet but for the clock and the muffled clang of the city beyond the curtained windows. The umbrella, mute and crimson, had told its tale of duplication and deceit. Its journey had led through quarrels and lies, and now its twin shadowed the truth. Wolfe, vast and unmoving, had discerned the crux. Murder was not for envy or spite, but for possession of proof hidden in a handle. The office carried the scent of strong coffee and the faintest trace of Fritz's kitchen, though every cup he served stood untouched. The suspects filled the red chairs in uneasy rows. Mason, with his affected poise, beginning to fray. Pierce, stiff as a schoolmistress awaiting judgment. Fenton, pale and quiet, and Brill, blotched and red, his heavy hands clenched on the arms of his chair. Kramer loomed near the mantel, chewing his cigar like it was the last edible object in Manhattan. Wolfe sat vast in the yellow chair, his eyelids lowered to half-mast. He had brought the umbrella out of the safe for this, the folded canopy glinting on the desk like a relic whose history no one dared recite. I stayed by my desk with notebook open, though at this point Wolfe needed no secretary. The words he was preparing had the weight of iron. I knew the rhythm. He would build carefully, setting each brick of deduction until the wall was too high for any of them to climb over. Wolfe opened his eyes. You were summoned, he began, because a man has been murdered, and each of you has contributed to his death, if not by hand, then by deceit. His voice rolled, heavy and certain. But only one among you drove the knife. Tonight we strip away diversions. Mason shifted. I've said already this is absurd. Silence, Wolfe said, not raising his voice, but the command fell like a gavel. Mason subsided, his lips tight. Wolfe gestured to the umbrella. This object is the axis. It contained proof, foreign drafts, of trades in stolen canvases. Victor Talbot sought to wield it as shield. Howard Brill sought it as salvation. Gregory Mason sought to duplicate it for substitution. Miss Pierce lied to protect another. Miss Fenton abandoned it to protect herself. All of you circled it, like vultures over carrion, but only one killed to reclaim it. Brill let out a huff. You'll not pin that on me. Wolfe ignored him. His gaze moved to Mason. You bribed the craftsman Denton to fashion a duplicate. Identical canopy, identical initials, without the hidden compartment. You intended to swap it, to leave Talbot clutching a worthless trinket while you or others possessed the drafts. A clever deceit, but not murder. Mason's face flushed crimson. You can't prove. I need not prove, Wolfe said. The craftsman has admitted your commission. You did not kill Talbot. You are guilty of cowardly trickery, nothing more. Pierce sat rigid, her lips compressed. Wolfe's gaze settled on her. You, Miss Pierce, declared hysterically that you killed in self-defense, but you erred. You described the knife as silver-handled, though that was never made public. You heard it whispered and claimed it as memory. That lie discredited you entirely. You confessed to protect another, perhaps Brill, perhaps Mason. It matters not. You did not strike Talbot. She gave a small cry, but Wolfe turned away, already finished with her. His eyes moved to Fenton. You brought the umbrella here, under pretext of fear. You claimed pursuit. You spoke of a notebook. You sought sanctuary, not blood. You are guilty of concealment, but not of killing. You lacked knowledge of what the umbrella contained. Your guilt is cowardice, not murder. Fenton's hands trembled in her lap, but she did not speak. Wolfe shifted, massive bulk leaning slightly forward. His gaze settled on Brill, and the air in the room tightened. You, sir, quarrelled with Talbot in public. You advanced money, demanded a canvas, received derision. You stormed, you shouted, you threatened, and on the night of his death you left your club for 20 minutes. You returned agitated, your coat bulging. You instructed your driver to lie, to claim you had never left. But the waiter saw you depart. The driver confessed, and within that interval, Talbot died. Brill slammed his palm on the chair arm. Circumstance, nothing more. You've no witness to say I stabbed him. Phooey, Wolfe murmured, a sound of pure disdain. You mistake precision for speculation. We have more than circumstance. He gestured. Archie. That was my cue. I rose, notebook in hand. I checked the club ledger. Brill signed in at 7:30, signed out at midnight. In between, the page was doctored. His signature was repeated, smudged, to suggest he never left. The steward hurried to close the book when I asked, and the driver admitted Mr. Brill ordered him to claim otherwise. Brill's face blazed, but I continued. A frame shop clerk saw Talbot carrying the umbrella at 10. That matches the time Brill slipped out. Brill tried to take it earlier, but failed. He had motive, he had rage, he had time. When Talbot was found, the silk fragment was at the scene. It was the umbrella Brill sought. Wolfe's hand descended onto the umbrella itself. The silver handle gleamed under the lamplight. This is the genuine article retrieved by Miss Fenton, examined by me. Within the hollow we found the drafts. Proof of smuggling, proof of crime. That was your goal, Brill. You killed to secure them. Kramer chewed his cigar furiously. Wolfe, you're saying flat out. I am saying, Wolfe cut across him, that Howard Brill murdered Victor Talbot in pursuit of these drafts. He struck not for passion, but to reclaim evidence that would have destroyed him. All else, Mason's deceit, Pierce's lie, Fenton's fear, are diversions. The fulcrum is here. He tapped the umbrella once more. Brill surged to his feet, face purple. Lies, all lies. I'll not be ruined by your games. Kramer moved fast, clamping a hand on his shoulder. Sit down, Brill. His voice was low, hard. You've been nailed. Brill tried to shake him off, but his strength failed against the inspector's grip. He sagged, muttering curses, his eyes wild. Wolfe closed his eyes, his voice rumbling. Inspector, you have your man. The case is clean. Kramer growled, chewing his cigar to pulp. You and your damned arrogance, Wolfe. Always holding out, always making me dance, but damn it, this one's clean. I can't deny it. I watched the room sag with relief and defeat. Mason slumped in his chair. Pierce hid her face. Fenton wept quietly. Brill muttered, but the fight was gone. Kramer signalled to his men waiting in the hall. They stepped in, ready to escort Brill downtown. Wolfe leaned back, vast and immovable once more. So ends the journey of the umbrella. Not ornament, not shelter, but instrument of ruin. I closed my notebook, the evidence complete, the case delivered whole. Outside, Manhattan thundered on, but within the brownstone justice had spoken, in Wolfe's heavy, inexorable voice. Brill's protests dwindled to a guttural growl as Kramer's men moved in, their faces set in the weary grimness of men accustomed to taking in the city's powerful alongside its petty thieves. He struggled once, then sagged, defeated by weight of evidence rather than force. The cigar between Kramer's teeth had all but disintegrated, but he chewed it as though it were Brill's last remaining shred of dignity. "Take him," Kramer ordered curtly. The detectives gripped Brill's arms and guided him toward the hall. His footsteps thudded like drums of retreat, each one slower than the last. When the door closed, the office seemed to exhale. The tension eased, but only slightly, for the air was still charged with Wolfe's pronouncement. Mason, Pierce, and Fenton remained, smaller now without Brill's bulk to draw attention. Mason's shoulders sagged as though the gallery he lorded over had collapsed. Pierce stared at the carpet, her hands twitching in her lap. Fenton, pale and trembling, dared a glance at Wolfe, then looked quickly away. Kramer turned back, his eyes blazing. "You enjoy this, don't you, Wolfe? Sitting fat in your chair, dragging me along by the nose until you're ready to drop the answer in my lap." Wolfe opened his eyes a fraction. "You exaggerate, Inspector. I suffer interruption, endure tedium, and compensate for incompetence. Enjoyment is irrelevant." I grinned. Kramer's growl deepened, but beneath it lay reluctant acceptance. He knew Wolfe was right, and he despised it. Wolfe shifted slightly in the yellow chair. "The diversions are worth noting. Mason's attempt at duplication shows envy and cowardice. Pierce's false confession shows loyalty misapplied. Fenton's fear shows weakness. Yet none were capable of the act itself. Only Brill combined motive, opportunity, and desperation. His 20 minutes away from the club sealed his guilt." Kramer spat out what remained of the cigar into the fireplace, where it landed with a hiss. "You always make it sound neat, but out there, nothing's neat. You give me the killer, I'll take it, but don't preach." Wolfe closed his eyes again, dismissing him. I set my notebook aside. "What about the others? You plan to let them go?" "Of course," Wolfe murmured. "Their guilt is moral, not criminal. The law may frown, but it cannot imprison for envy or cowardice." Mason bristled. "I've done nothing unlawful." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Phooey! You attempted fraud. Be grateful the law has larger prey tonight." Pierce spoke softly, her first word since Wolfe cut her confession apart. "I only wanted to protect—" "Enough," Wolfe said, his voice slicing like steel. "You cannot protect by fabrication. You endanger only yourself." She fell silent. Fenton whispered, "So it is finished?" "Finished?" Wolfe's lip curled. "The man who frightened you is gone. The drafts that could ruin reputations are secure, but your conscience is yours to manage. Do not confuse resolution with absolution." She lowered her gaze again. Kramer barked at them. "You heard him. Get out. You're not cleared, but you're not in cuffs either. Take it, and be thankful." They rose, subdued. Fritz appeared at the door, his face calm, and escorted them with a dignity they could not muster themselves. The office emptied, leaving only Wolfe, Kramer, Fritz, and me. Kramer blew out a long breath. "You know, Wolfe, one day you'll choke on that arrogance. But tonight you've handed me a case tied with ribbon. Brill'll crack before dawn. The papers will scream, the commissioner will grin, and I'll take the heat, and you'll sit here, smug with your beer." "Correct," Wolfe said. He reached for the glass Fritz had set at his elbow, lifted it, and drank with deliberate calm. Kramer stared at him, then turned to me. "How do you stand it, Goodwin? Day after day?" I shrugged. "I get out of the house." Kramer barked a laugh despite himself. He pulled his hat from the rack, jammed it onto his head, and growled, "I'll be back when the next corpse drops. You'll be ready with another lecture, I'm sure." He stomped out, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, but not tense. Fritz gathered the empty cups, moving with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to crime being solved around him. When he left, the office seemed to return to its natural order. Wolfe leaned back, immense and composed, the umbrella still resting on the desk, like the trophy of a battle won. I regarded it with no affection. "Funny thing," I said. "All this for an umbrella. Men shouting in the street, lies piled high, murder done, reputation smashed, and all it ever did was keep the rain off." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. "You mistake form for essence. It was never an umbrella. It was always proof, disguised. That is the only reason men fought for it." I lit a match, more for the satisfaction of flame than for need. "Still, 1,000 umbrellas in Manhattan, and this one brings us murder." "Because it concealed consequence," Wolfe said. "Objects are meaningless until men invest them with desperation. Then they become instruments of ruin." I let that settle, then asked, "And the drafts?" "They remain," Wolfe said. "We will deliver them when the authorities are prepared to comprehend their significance. Until then, they are safe." I stretched, closing my notebook. "Case closed, then." Wolfe's eyes closed. "Delivered whole, as promised." The umbrella gleamed under lamplight. Silent now, Its journey ended. Outside, the city continued its endless roar, indifferent to the ruin of men and the restoration of order within one brownstone on West 35th Street. Fritz's footsteps moved in the kitchen, the clock ticked, and Wolfe, vast and immovable, reached again for his beer. The office was still. The red chairs stood vacant, the tension they had held gone with the people who had filled them. The lamplight fell in its steady glow across the desk, catching the brass edges of Wolfe's blotter and the rim of his chilled glass. Wolfe had resumed his customary position in the yellow chair, immense shoulders settled, eyes half closed, one hand cradling the stem of the beer. He had demanded the moment the last echo of Kramer's departure faded down the hall. The umbrella was absent from sight, but its presence lingered. I had locked it away in the safe at Wolfe's order, the silver handle glinting one last time as I spun the dial. Inside it slept now, folded and mute, not as ornament, but as evidence. The umbrella's journey had ended, its riddle solved, though its shadow still stretched across the office. I leaned back in my chair, notebook closed at last, pen laid aside. "You know," I said, "an umbrella's supposed to keep the rain off. Funny how this one only brought storms." Wolfe grunted. He lifted his beer, drank, and set it down with a sigh of satisfaction. "Manhattan's got plenty of shadows already," I went on. "Doesn't need umbrellas adding to them. Even when the sun's out, there's always some fellow lurking with a scheme." His eyes opened, lids heavy, gaze fixed on me. "You are indulging yourself, Archie." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But I've been thinking. That umbrella travelled more miles in a few weeks than most folks do in a year. Dealers, collectors, secretaries, rivals, all chasing after it like it was a crown jewel. And all it ever held was paper. Paper that made liars of them, and a corpse of Talbot." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered. "Objects are nothing. Men invest them with fear, with desperation, and thus they become peril." "Sure," I said. "But still, if you'd told me at the start I'd be chasing umbrellas across half the city, I'd have asked for a raise." The corners of his mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly, but there. He lifted the glass again, drank deep, and let the silence resume. The clock ticked evenly, marking the minutes in which the city outside pressed on with its racket. Horns, voices, the rattle of trucks over cobblestones. Here, within these walls, order had been restored. The case was closed, the killer named, the evidence secure. Wolfe had delivered whole as he promised, and I had played my part, filing and fetching, asking and prodding, chasing a trail as improbable as any I'd seen. I stood, stretched, and walked to the safe, resting a hand on the cool steel. "Locked away now. You think Kramer'll handle it properly?" Wolfe's eyes opened again. "Inspector Kramer will chew, sputter, and fume, but he will not err. He has what he needs. Our part is finished." I nodded, satisfied. The umbrella would leave this house soon, bound for police custody and eventually the courts. It would speak its testimony without words, its hollow handle condemning the man who had killed to possess it. Our task had been to unmask, and that we had done. The air shifted as footsteps approached. Fritz appeared in the doorway, his apron neat, his expression calm. "Dinner is ready," he announced. Wolfe rumbled assent. He rose with care, immense bulk unfolding from the yellow chair. He straightened his vest, glanced once at the desk as if ensuring no disorder lingered, then turned toward the dining room. I followed, pausing just long enough to flick off the lamp above the umbrella's former resting place. Darkness claimed the desk, but the image of crimson silk and gleaming silver lingered in my mind. So ended the affair of the red umbrella, a case born of deceit, carried on quarrels, and resolved by the weight of proof. It had shown again that in Manhattan, even under clear skies, shadows were never far. And as Fritz set dinner before us, the brownstone reclaimed its calm. The riddle had been solved, the order restored, and the house on West 35th Street settled back into its rhythm, as if murder had never crossed its threshold.